How's everybody doing out there? This is the Black Effect Enterprise, and this is an episode of the Black Effect, and this is a hip hop history video. This is one of this is also gonna tie into real life. Because hip hop culture and black culture is pretty closely knit. So I want to get into this. I'm not gonna keep you waiting too long. The men of the '90s, the and things that they stood for compared to the men today. And I'm talking about men like from 18. I'm talking about men in adult age range. You understand? These men of the men who were born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s and 2000s, compared to the men today who were born in the 2000s or a little bit before. And just you look, and then some men, if you just look at the artists, and we're going to talk about in hip hop, what did they stand for? These men in the 90s had certain codes. Let's use Tupac, for example. We know that those men loved their mothers. They held their mothers in high regard, even though they recognized that their mothers wasn't perfect, that a lot of them actually had problems and put them in the situations that they grew up in. Their mothers are the ones that caused it, but they loved their mothers. No matter what, these men were gonna defend their mother and defend the women in their life. This was the codes of men in the '90s. Today, you have people talking about you know, defending women and all that. But if you really look at it, a lot of you have dudes, actual guys killing they mother. You have black boys, young black boys, young men who actually have cases for killing their mother. You have men, grown men, killing their own mother. That's something, a code that the men of the '90s did not stand by. We would not. That's unheard of in the black. That was unheard of in the black community. Another thing, the men of the '90s, the code that they had was they didn't. You didn't see them going out, and they had less mental illness, man. You didn't see them go out and just do mass shootings or things like that. Yeah, sure, they would be in the hood, and don't get me wrong, they'll shoot it out in the hood. But you didn't have them to go out and just do random shootings, things like that just with no purpose or direction to it. That was something that black men by and large did not do. Columbine, young black men didn't do that. But now, the men of today, you have more and more. Look at the subway shooter you just had, you know? And I know this man, I don't know what year this man was born, but you're having more and more young mental illness. And this comes from the culture. You understand? It comes from the culture shift, the values of the men. What I'm saying, and the point of this whole video is, you had the men that was born in the '90s. I don't care if they were street guys, whatever. These men were very noble. These men had a noble code that they live by. There is no code to live by today. And that's why I'm saying, so rap is synonymous with black culture. That's why I use this as an example, as an illustration for you. But so another example, you had the men of the '90s. They basically, they wouldn't, if they were involved in a certain activities with their brothers or their peers or if they were involved in any nefarious activities, illegal activity, the number one rule that they live by is they were not telling the police anything. It was just like, it was an unsaid thing that you shine the police on. They're your, it's like cops and robbers, God and the devil. You understand these things? It's like we're sworn to this song and dance, from if you chose to be in the street life. Now, if you choose to live righteously and not do illegal things, then you're not no longer at odds with the police. Actually, you want the police around. So now you turn or at odds. You have to pick one. You're at odds with the street level. So with people doing wrong, that mean you're not gonna that mean if you're gonna be a civilian, you pick and choose, you pick that one. And if you see something happening, then there ain't no problem with you telling it. You pick the civilian life then. That was understood of men in the 90s. Nowadays, it's just like the lines are blurred. People is fine, like, niggas like could be a whole Jay Reed out. You had this in hip hop. Rick Ross was a correctional officer. The dude Tekashi 6ix9ine snitched on everybody and just came back. You've pretty much had everything unspeakable done in hip hop. That's what go to show you that it's not like rappers aren't really, aren't real. Like they're just commentators. Like this, like WWE, and we should understand that by now. Not saying that they should be doing anything. Once you becoming that, and we should treat it like a profession. Nigga, if you make it out the streets, you should be thanking God, bro. And niggas in the rumble tumble, niggas in the street level should be trying to do whatever they can. You know what I'm saying? It's a million ways to make money these days legally. They should be trying to do whatever they can just to, get some skills and find out what they need to do. And, the brothers need, and it's gonna be brothers creating more programs, coming up like myself doing that, trying to mentor, these young men because to give them the codes, like, because another most important thing, like you see like Tupac in his raps, he was always talking about God. Most people you heard in the interviews was giving praise to God in these awards. They at least had some reverence and awareness of God, which gave those men a spiritual strength, a grounding that a lot of these rappers don't have today. You didn't see men of the 90s popping pills, taking hard drugs. Like rappers didn't even want to do no coke. Like if niggas was doing coke and hip hop and stuff like that, they was looked at with the side eye. Like the real cats was looking at them like, man, you a hype. Like you a clucker. That's what they was looking at them. Like they was looking at them like they was a clucker. And you had a few rappers, and definitely like in where I'm from in Texas, they were sipping syrup. That was definitely around a while when I was even before I was around listening to hip hop. They was sipping syrup in Houston, and they was big in Houston, not just in Texas as a whole, but sipping syrup was big in Houston. You understand? But and that was just a small subculture. But for the most part, we didn't believe in, doing anything outside of smoking a little weed and drinking some alcohol. That was it. You understand? If you did anything else, we was looking at you like you was an addict. And even if you was being out here being drunk, like just getting sloppy drunk, and nah, we wasn't having that. We would check our own partners for that. We wouldn't let that happen. You understand? But yeah, nowadays you have so many rappers who don't care how they treat things, what they put in their body. They living like that. They basically you could have drug addicts basically rapping. Basically, a dude on a fentanyl addict can basically be busting raps and people will buy it. You understand? People will buy that. People, the rappers of today dying, ODing, man. They ODing out. Like, you didn't hear about rappers. You may have heard about rappers of the 90s getting shot. Stuff like that. But you didn't hear about them ODing off of no hard drugs or nothing like that. That's the code that we held. Another thing, like I said, just the spiritual grounding itself holds so much. The reverence for grandmothers, our mothers, these strong women in our family, the just having some integrity. Like I say, it was no deviating from telling the police nothing. You was on the camera, like just in the culture in the 90s, man. You was on the camera, and in the early 2000s, if they caught you on the tap, the wire tap, you was on camera, you took the stand, you said anything, man, people was gonna get on your case. Now you can hide it a little bit. You could have hid it better then because you didn't have the internet. Nowadays, you can't hide that. So when people, but it go to show you, but when people see it in today's day and age, they don't even care. It's like, what he do? He just sent 3, 4 people down in the creek. He just sent 10 niggas, down up, just up the road without a paddle, up Ish Creek that without a paddle. Hey, what he putting out next? What antics is he doing next? It's just such a quick culture, and it's no integrity. There is, but you believe you me. In the 90s, the men of the 90s, if you did that, it was no coming back. No one was gonna buy your stuff. The collective of the culture just basically ostracized you, like as rightfully so, and you had to do something else because you couldn't be phony. That was another thing. We didn't allow you to be phony. The WWE stuff, yeah, it went on. Rappers still was doing the CB4 act. They didn't really live what we know. They weren't living like they doing everything that they said. But for the most part, those raps were real. The stuff they were saying were reference may have been conflated and aggrandized, I would say, like made to be bigger. But they were doing those things they were talking about. A lot of the stuff that they were doing were put in those raps. You would think that they was just talking to a vague person, like, nah, they wasn't just talking. They were talking to each other. They were beefing with each other. That's what was going on there. But today, you just heard a lot of today, these rappers are just talking. It's just a lot of stuff that sound good. It's no integrity. It's all about getting some money. Let me see. The women, when the men of the 90s had codes when it comes to women, they lived by the bro codes. Men would not let a woman, man, fighting over a woman was kind of unheard of. You was a simp. Niggas call you a simp and a sucker and a buster. If you was sitting there fighting over a woman, like the saying, we didn't even have to go into, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have none of that, but it was collectively known amongst black men, and just amongst men in the culture that you don't be fighting over women, bro. Like niggas will have, when you do the run up on you, like, man, you gonna fight me over a girl, man, over a brawl? You seen on Menace to Society when the dude came to Kane, the girl cousin, and he was like, partner, I don't like the way you been treating her. And then Kane was like, you gonna fight me over, he called her the B word, Now I get, he didn't have to do that, but it's like, man, you gonna fight me. Basically what he was saying is like, you gonna fight me over a female, bro. Like, what do you know how they talk, you know how they be. You understand? No offense, but that's the men of today. They go kamikaze themselves over the word of a female, and she don't even be telling the truth. You understand? That's real talk. But yeah, we live by total bro codes, total man things rules that men should live by for the harmony of the brotherhood, for integrity of the earth. Men had integrity. The men of the 90s. Men today, like I say, they following behind the booty, doing all that. Look at even the women had integrity. Like, I'll do a different video on the differences between them, because they had a lot more integrity than they do today. The women are totally different. The women of the 90s compared to the women of today. So again, the black men and the culture in the 90s, you had dudes, the men believed, they were still having a lot of babies. They were having some babies out of wedlock, but men still believed in marriage and being in the value in having a black family and the value of having a family. Even look at people like Snoop Dogg, man. I mean, Snoop Dogg been with his woman for a long time. Been with this black woman. And yeah, he put her through sheer hell, but it's a lot of women who, going through that with their man, and he ain't even got money or fame. But that's just some things that happen. She chose to stay. And you have LL Cool J, who been with his wife for a long time. You ain't never heard about no scandals with LL Cool J, and this was a ladies' man rapper. People like Denzel, these men believed in that. Today's day and age, not so much so, and it's not just the men's fault. A lot of rappers, a lot of young men are cynical about these things and skeptical because they look at the way women are operating and the way the laws are set against them. It's not smart to sign no government marriage contract because the courts benefit from all of that, from your divorces and they get paid on both ends. So you need to stay, they smart enough to stay away from that. So that's the difference. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that's the difference right now. A lot of those men are having more babies out of wedlock, and that's not a good thing. If you're gonna be sleeping with these women, man, you just need to make sure that you're not having no children from this situation. That's why I advise you not to even be doing that, running around trying to pump and dump, because it's hard to do that. Niggas be falling all into the coochie, falling in love with the coochie, man. That's what it is. That was another thing we didn't really believe in the 90s, man. Like, you had to be an exceptional woman for the man to get with you just out of the sea of women. You had to improve yourself. You have to be exceptional. Not saying you gotta be jumping through no hoops. No, but men really, there was really value in getting with a person and working on that relationship. Like I said, and into the men of the 90s, dude, and if you wasn't gonna bring that to the table, then they weren't gonna marry you or get with you or anything like that. A lot of dudes, a lot of men, like I said, were still having kids. We get that, just like today. So it's not really much difference there in the value system, but yeah. So that's just kind of what I just wanna leave it on. Just gave you a few examples of the differences of the culture and the values of the men in the 90s compared to the men of today. And this is the black men, basically. I use hip hop as just the illustration to paint the picture for you, because I know a lot of people otherwise. I mean, we understand, a lot of us, it's black, white, whatever. We listen to hip hop, we know about hip hop, all that. So, but yeah, if you just look at the artistry, go back and just look at some videos. Go back and look at some hip hop videos from the 90s, early 2000s, and then look at the videos of somebody today. Any one of the artists, and you'll see a stark difference amongst the men and the women. Just the mannerisms, the skits, the things that they promote, the writing of the video. I told you the main thing is these men and women were spiritual. You will hear the stories of black people like being some of the most religious, like being the most religious group of people. This is true, and this was taught because of it was taught in the family, passed down. These are the chosen people of God to be the progenitor, the first fruits of all the races. You understand? Not to take nothing away from anybody else or put the race on the pedestal, but so you had, now if you look at the videos back then, you had a lot of creativity, but you didn't have all this demonic imagery. Nowadays, it's like a point to put all this demonic imagery in the videos. Demonic imagery, a bunch of homosexuality. That was another thing. Man, starkly against that. There was no budging. You did that, you were out of the game. If you did something, you got caught like that. Like, look at how Tupac did Dr. Dre. Dre ran for a long time. But yeah, so you didn't have all that imagery in the videos, man. You had a lot of stories, imagery in the videos that had something to do with God, or the Lord, or Jesus. Look at Hate Me Now. Dave and Puff Daddy got pissed about that video, but he tried to act like he was pissed, but it's like, bro, you okayed it. You knew what Nas was doing. Carrying that cross and getting himself crucified. Nas was tripping with that stuff. And everybody agreed with that. Everybody agreed so much so that they took it out of the video in the mainstream. But you could get the uncut version now. See that now. But you didn't have demonic imagery in the videos. Now it's a total shift. The men of today and the women of today, they willing to go along with this. They following Satan a lot more. It seems like you picking it, if you look at the men of the 90s, the codes they had or who they were following, and then the people of the today, men of today and who they following, it's a total difference. The imagery shows it. The art shows it. Art reflects life. It shows it. You understand? You have to just be smart enough, have enough discernment from the Lord to see this. That's why I be, preaching to y'all to get Jesus Christ, man, in y'all life. Get the Holy Spirit in your heart. Get the Holy Spirit so you can have discernment and have favor from God and everything else that come with it. But that's what I'm saying. The men of today, they not really living like that, and they don't have any. There's really not many codes. And that reflects in the world. It's not many in codes today that men live by. But the men of the 90s, you may think a lot of them were thugs or whatever. I use Tupac just look at Tupac as the archetype. You may have thought he was a thug and everything else, but Tupac had a lot to offer the world, his people. He did, was getting on his mission for God. He was heading in that direction. You see that, that from his last album, all the religious undertones, him coming out with the euthanasia, trying to unite black people all across the world. Man, he was on his way. You understand? You have men trying to do certain things, but they don't have that level of integrity. I don't see that today. Men are like 50 Cent going out here still trolling all over the internet. It's like, brother, what are you doing for the brothers? What are you doing for the young brothers? You understand? I know you're doing the shows and stuff, but that's not, what you doing that for. You doing that to be relevant. So it's like, and I'm not trying to pick on Phil. I got love for 50. But it's just like, because he was in the era. He comes from the era. He was one of the last of the best. Actually, definitely like the last of them, of the men that I'm speaking of with integrity who have those codes. So it's like you should be, you could do a little more, man. You definitely got the, instead of just trolling people and all that other stuff. But yeah, the 90s, man, these were a noble group of men, of black men. I'm talking about specifically the black men. This was a noble group of men in the 90s. Did a lot. Men had a lot of skills, a lot of talent. Just look at the night. Most of the stuff that happened in the 90s was some of the best programming, art. Even in the early 80s, in the 80s also, 80s and 90s. Like I said, the men were born in the 80s, and the 80s and 90s were some of the best programming, the best era, like the golden era for the black culture and just culture in general, like people in general. It was like a perfect point of Renaissance spirituality and curiosity, and so everything was kind of like meeting at the same. And like I said, but I'm sticking specifically with the black men, that group of black men. They may have been raised by single mothers. Some of them had fathers. They may have been raised in the inner city ghettos, but those men had codes of integrity. If you find men like that, you need to link up with them. You know what I'm saying? Because those men have something to offer you. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and end the video. This is the Black Effect Enterprise. It's your man, Nico B. I'm gone.